Assalamu alaikum, everybody. Welcome to YouTube Live, and with me today is Jordan M. Assalamu alaikum, bro.
Wa alaikum salam.
How are you doing?
Alhamdulillah, I'm good. Kind of enjoying the lockdown, but I think the longer it goes on, getting a bit stir crazy now. So,
Yeah, there is that. But it kind of reminds you of what it must feel like. Not exactly, but prison, right? Because you're confined to a small space, but you're more comfortable. It's like a comfortable prison.
yeah, it is. I've often wondered if I could take myself to a desert island, away from work, away from all the stress, and just read and stuff like that. What would it be like? And this kind of feels like that. Yeah, I guess we've got to make the most of it, haven't we?
Yeah, absolutely. But one of the things which always helps me through every difficulty that I go through in life is always remembering that, if you have a grain of sand in a vast desert, that grain of sand is insignificant. And likewise, our lives on earth are like literally a few seconds.
Yeah,
Um,
subhanallah.
on Facebook, I'm part of some groups who they regularly post ancient coins. So they'll like post a coin of ancient Rome, ancient Egypt, whatever, ancient Persia. And they'll have these coins, and on the coins they'll have a king, right? And it'll have a date, and sometimes the date is like 2,000 years ago, or something like that. And it says this king reigned from this period to this period, and then I think to myself, that king is like completely forgotten now. Nobody knows who this guy is, what his life is about. And that the time that he was alive was 50 years, 40 years, whatever. And it's been 2,000 years, meaning he's been dead longer than he's been alive on Earth. And it's just him and his deeds. That's all that matters. Everything else is meaningless.
Yeah, we are at the end of the day, we are just grains of sand, aren't we? And we're only here for a short time. So yeah, I think that half of it, like you say, it makes you realize the insignificance, and the other half makes you realize how valuable the time is that you have. How valuable is the time that you have here, and all the good deeds that you do all make a difference. So.
Absolutely. So I'm going to give you some of my logic behind bringing on reverts to do their stories. So I've been involved in Dawah, alhamdulillah, for a number of years now, and a consistent pattern I've seen is when somebody accepts Islam and you speak to them why they accepted Islam, one of the key factors for them accepting Islam is watching revert stories online. This seems to be a almost universal thing. I've seen this everywhere. It's this thing about, okay, so I wasn't sure if I could make the decision. Then I saw somebody who I could, relate to, somebody that looked like me, somebody from my background. So then I thought to myself, okay, I could do it. So the purpose of you being on here today is that we want anybody watching who is thinking about Islam to recognize another story that perhaps this will help the person on their journey. Additionally, it's a way of motivating Muslims, because we're going to go into your background, and then perhaps when you were the way you were previously, somebody may have seen you in the street and thought, oh, this guy, he'd never accept Islam. So you're going to show that's not the case. And lastly, and most importantly, I'm always telling this to reverts when I meet them, that you guys need to be the face of Islam, right? Simply because we're, even though a lot of us in the Western world, we were born there, our parents are there and everything, there's nothing like an indigenous native person representing Islam in a language and in a cultural sensitive way for that particular audience. That has way more impact than the likes of me, which are like second, third generation people.
Yeah, I think, and a big part of my story actually, and I'll go into it later, but obviously is I was very anti-Islam, and then I saw the beauty of Islam, but I never really thought it was a religion for me. It was only really when I saw Hamza at the park, if you know Hamza, Speaker's Corner, arguing, a kind of light bulb went off. Sort of like, hang on a minute, there's a guy that looks like me, dresses like me. This is Islam. So something like that did have a. What I'd say about reverts is I generally thought, because I started up a little channel and I like to do a bit of dawah myself, even though I'm not knowledgeable yet. I've been Muslim a couple of years. I'm moving forward. But I always thought my kind of effect would be on maybe English people or looking at Islam a different way. That's what I wanted to do. But I think, like you said, the most people that I'd say maybe subscribe or watch reverts are born Muslims, and maybe it's sort of, I don't know if it hits home or people see a revert and they see someone that's accepted what they maybe had on their doorstep. Now what I would say is I believe a born Muslim goes through the same process as a revert does anyway. So I believe reverts get a lot of credit, more credit they deserve. Because I think if you're born into a Muslim family, I mean, quite often you are probably steer away from what you were grown up with. But at some point you have to ask yourself, do I believe in Allah? Do I believe in the Messenger, peace be upon him? And if your reason is because my mum and dad told me or because I was born, I think then you have to go through the same process that arguably I had to go through.
Yeah,
that makes sense.
Absolutely, and I think you hit the nail on the head that everybody does have to go through some sort of journey. But I think what's different is that a revert has to make a complete paradigm shift, right?
Yeah.
So if you look at the story of Ibrahim alayhi salam, Ibrahim had to go against his entire society, and he had to, even though he wasn't trying to do that, he was seen as a traitor, he was seen as an outcast. And that kind of reminds me of when I was in East London a couple of years ago, and we were at a stall, and there was a white revert brother with us. And nobody was harassing us. We were giving out the flyers. People were taking it. It was a very nice environment. Nothing usually happens at that stall. It's very, very friendly environment in East Ham. And what happened was a white guy, he just looked like a typical, just average person, not like, working class. He was just an average guy. He walked past and he looked at this brother who was a revert, and he's wearing a thobe and he's wearing a hat. And the thobe was the thobe was white, the beard was white, the hat was white, he was white, so he just looked like a bit of a movie character. He literally looked at him and he said, "You're a traitor." Yeah, that's all he said to him. And he walked past with this disgust.
Yeah.
So I got a feel of, that's what the feeling is.
Yeah, and you're right. And I think that in my journey to Islam, I think I knew I was a Muslim a few weeks before I took my Shahada, and my fight against it was really, like you say, the repercussions I would have in my normal life. What would my friends think? What would my families think? And in general, what would the country see me as? And I was aware of traitor, and Islam isn't fashionable. It's not like where you take up Buddhism and everyone thinks, wow, the guy's doing yoga. What a spiritual guy.
Yeah.
You embrace Islam, people start to generally worry about you. Are you getting into Syria? Are you and I had some friends really worry about that, and for me it was really confusing, even though because I saw Islam as beautiful and I tried to display that. I half understood it as well because I'd come from that mindset, so I did try and kind of explain to people about what all the misconceptions there were, and I think a lot of my early parts of Dawah was a lot about trying to tell people about the misconceptions that I'd learned, the arguments against.
And it's interesting that you point out that you were anti-Islam, and then you came to Islam, and now you sympathize, obviously, with people that have anti-Islamic attitudes. Now, to get us started, so what's your background? Like, which city are you from? And
I grew up in North London, and sort of around Edgware. That way. That way?
I'm not too far. I was the Halsden.
All right. Yes, that's where my mum is. I've moved just a bit, a few miles away, but I'm still in that area. And so I didn't particularly have much relationship with his Muslim friends and things like that. And I think, to be honest, I think I grew up fairly normal, what I'd say. But I think it started for me when Tommy Robinson came out. And so he was off the back of. You saw a lot on the news. You saw Muslims burning poppies. You saw terrorist attacks. You saw grooming gangs. And so I think to the normal sort of British geezer looking at this on the news, you kind of you see enough of it, and you start to think. I wouldn't say I went around having issues with Muslims, but in the back of my mind, I thought, there's something not quite right.
Yeah.
And I think, to be honest, when Tommy Robinson first came out, I think Muslims themselves are probably against terrorism and grooming gangs. So I didn't, I saw that as a kind of a I remember actually the other day I looked through my old Facebook posts from years ago, and I had they took I used to like Subway, and they took ham away from Subway and they turned it into turkey ham. And I remember leaving a post on my Facebook saying, you know, what are the Muslims doing? You know, they're taking my ham. What next? You know, what next? So, but I think, to cut a long story short with that, I mean, I was very much probably sort of on the right wing of politics as well. But the thing that happened in my life was my sister converted to Islam about 20 years ago.
Wow.
I had a terrible relationship with my sister anyway. We didn't speak, and that wasn't because of the Islam, but we fell out really badly. And then she became Muslim, and to be honest, I did see how it disciplined her life. But we didn't speak for 20 years. But my sister had a daughter, so she married a Pakistani guy, and had a daughter who was then my niece. Now my sister allowed me to see that, you know, my niece every weekend. I used to take her to a restaurant or something. We used to sit, and we used to. You know, she started getting a bit more mature, and mashallah, her Islam was always very strong. And we'd sit there and she'd say things to me like, Uncle Jordan, I don't want you to go to hell. Or she'd even say things, you know, during Christmas time, she'd go, do you know Allah doesn't have a son? And she was very much on those lines. But I you know, I love my niece. I don't have kids myself, and I think I invest a lot in my niece. But I was concerned for her. So my anti-Islam kind of feeling, sort of, I wanted to look into it because I wanted to go to my family and say, look, we can't have my niece growing up, her name's Iman. We can't have Iman growing up as a Muslim. She's going to have to cover herself. She's going to meet a Muslim guy who's going to oppress her. I didn't want that for her. So I started to look into Islam and women. And I think my journey along it, this went on for quite a few months. And it got to the point where I actually saw Islam as a protection for a young girl. And I thought, hang on a minute, all the girls in the West that are, you know, I thought if a girl follows Islam, she's protected from so many things that I saw young girls getting involved in. Yeah. So I thought, you know, for a young niece, fantastic. And so I went along. That's where I started to sort of accept Islam. And then obviously, as I started looking more and more into it. Obviously, I had to hold a mirror up and go, what about for you as well? And so I started to get fairly obsessed with it, to be honest. And at the time, I was with a girl. I was engaged to a partner who's Catholic, and she said to me, you know, get off those Muslim channels, get off those, stop reading those Muslim books. But I mean, to cut a long story short, because that went on for ages, and I looked into everything, and it got to the point I did towards the end of my journey stumble across Speaker's Corner as well on videos, and I remember watching Mansour, Mohammed Hijab, and whilst I really appreciated I noticed they're winning all the arguments. Like I said earlier, it was when I saw Hamza that something really started clicking with me. It was like, there's a guy who's dressed like me, who well, he kind of dresses like me. He's a white guy arguing for Islam. And I think that's when it really clicked, that because I think even though I understood all the feeling that Islam said to mankind, that I understood all those things, I think in the back of my mind I still thought, you know, Islam is for the Middle East or Pakistan. It's not really for me. But I remember seeing someone once say that, you know, how can truth be defined on the patch of land you're born on? I thought, that's right. So because I'm born here, am I supposed to be a Christian? And I'd looked into Christianity because I'd gone out with a Christian, an Orthodox Christian girl before the girl I was engaged to, and I used to go to church with her, and I just none of it ever made sense to me. The original sin, the Trinity, the basics of the religion never made sense to me, so I wasn't attracted. I'd always believed in a God. I'd always believed in a creator, and I was exposed to a bit of philosophy as a teenager, and so I think I just came out of that thinking, well, there is a God, but you know, whatever, I'll just carry on living my life. So yeah, I think in terms of where I get to there, I guess I then contacted EF Dawah on Facebook because I also wanted to meet Muslims and speak to Muslims. I went down to Speaker's Corner. I met Abbas, Imran, Hamza, and I'm very thankful that they're the first Muslims I met, actually, because mashallah, they took me out to eat, and we just had a really, really good connection with them, and they've helped me throughout my whole journey. But yeah, I don't know whether you want to come in there or whether I've gone on too long.
No. I mean, I was sort of thinking back to, I think, one of your earliest videos at Speaker's Corner, which I was watching. You know, you were like, you were definitely interested. At the same time, you're a little bit hesitant.
Yes.
It's about meeting people, and I still remember your story right at the beginning. I didn't meet you then, but I was watching the videos and stuff. And then how these 2 years went past, or however long it is, and how you have managed to learn the basics, get involved, even become a target for some of the people
yeah, I'm token
you probably used to follow before.
Yeah.
It's come full circle.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, there's one thing I wanted to highlight, which is it's interesting you mentioned Hamza, because one thing I've noticed he does is when he's tackling, say, things like the grooming gangs or terrorism or ills in society, and I've seen he does this a lot at the Speaker's Corner, when speaking to especially English people. He puts it in a way that's not entirely apologetic from an Islamic perspective, and not entirely binary either. So he'll sort of accept the wrong, and he'll also sort of give the Islamic perspective on it. And I think that makes it a lot more palatable, right? But when you, for example, hear about something like this and you say, oh, no, that's nothing to do with us. Oh, no, that's all fake news. And I think that's probably because he's thinking of it from perspective that if I was non-Muslim, and I remember being non-Muslim, then how would I want somebody to address my question? And I think that plays a role in.
Right. And the 5 poisons, he does that really exceptionally well. I remember looking at the 5 poisons, because as I was looking to Islam, it made me reflect on the society I live in. So, I live in a society where there's alcohol, there's gambling, there's sexual immorality, there's interest, and all these things are, there's drugs, and all these things are destroying society. And yet Islam was the only thing that I could see out there that was giving real guidance against these things. So I think for me, I think a big part of my journey was, because I think before my journey into Islam, I always, like most people, I thought I can guide myself. I know what's good and bad, and whatever happens at the end, I reckon I'll be all right because I'm a decent bloke. But obviously, clearly, I don't really have any real definition of morality without, where was I getting my morality from? And so, I think it was the realization. It was kind of almost humbling yourself to realize I need guidance. I actually need guidance in my life. For me, I always believed in God. Now, if there was an all-powerful, all-loving God, I would imagine that God would want to contact his creation. And Islam was giving that explanation as well. And I looked into the Quran, which I'd never realized was a book like it was. I had no idea. At school we were just taught this is the book, this is the Bible, this is the scripture and all that. But the Quran, obviously is claiming it's the word of God. It's even testing you, if you can create one surah like it, if you can find any contradictions. And I started looking into the Quran a lot more as well, even before I came to Speaker's Corner. And I remember one thing that sticks out. I started looking into linguistic miracles, seemed to really stick out for me. And it was obviously the Quran is revealed over 23 years. And within that time, if it was a human being writing it, you would see, for instance, if their child dies, you would see that in their writing, or if something happened along the line, you'd see that in their writing. Whereas the Quran is mono, I forgot the word, but it throughout the whole thing. So this was coming because I wasn't looking at Muslim experts. I was actually looking at non-Muslim experts to guide me through these. Yeah. And I was actually looking at what a lot of non-Muslim experts were saying about the Quran. But that's one of many things. I mean, the prophecies. I think a big thing was it was introduced to me by Hamza. Actually, was the propositions from Muhammad, peace be upon him. Was he a liar? Was he deluded? Was he a madman? Or was he telling the truth? And I think the thing is, my whole journey, I wanted to find something against Islam so I could drop out. I didn't want. I was almost like treading on fire, getting closer, and I wanted to get off. I didn't want to. I was fighting against it as much as I could. But unfortunately, Islam for me, and I think it is instinctively as well inside, Islam has all of the answers. It answers all the questions that I believe God would have, and so I couldn't really fight against it, to be honest.
And I think what's important to note here, and this is part of our Dawah training as well, and this is obviously something that you spoke about, is you first had this willingness to acknowledge that you need guidance, right? And that humbleness, and there's these three things that I was talking about yesterday as well, that you gotta be humble, you gotta seek guidance, like it has to be a case where you're actively seeking guidance, and you gotta be sincere. And when you have the humbleness, the sincerity, and the thirst for guidance, then guidance comes your way. But if you're somebody who's like indifferent, all of these arguments, you'll find something and you'll say, well, I don't really agree. That's not really convincing. So it's a big part of the dawah is actually getting the non-Muslim to understand that it's not just giving you abstract arguments. Allah says in the Quran that He gives proof, but whoever wants to see it sees it. Whoever doesn't want to see it, they can be blind to it. So it's not like something which everybody will recognize. If you're not humble, if you're not sincere, if you're not wanting guidance, you will not see the evidences.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think for me, one thing I'm looking at the moment, because I feel that the psychology of theism. So a lot of people believe that for someone to embrace religion, or like myself, I've gone through some terrible, horrible time in my life. I've been to prison. I've had no friends. I can't get a girlfriend. I was genuinely happy before. When I say happy, I was content. It was only really the fact that I had a Muslim niece that made me really look into it. Otherwise, I don't think I would have probably perhaps even bothered, because I was fairly happy with what I was doing. So, and I think there is this kind of, when I go Speaker's Corner, speak online, I feel that now as a religious person, an atheist almost looks down on me, like I've suddenly lost some kind of intellectual high ground. They're the scientists, they're the intellectual ones, they're the ones that have had really good childhoods and no issues. They're so strong, they don't need a God. But I'm looking into, and I might do a video on it at some point, is the psychology of atheists, because I believe if you look at a lot of the top atheists like Freud, Dawkins, Nietzsche, a lot of these people actually have had some very trauma in their childhoods that you could argue has sort of led them away from God. A lot of these people have made up their minds before they become scientists, so that they've turned their back on religion. That maybe their father passed away, and they've turned their back on kind of this higher power being, and then they've gone and then they've sort of created their journey into atheism. And I'm not doing that to bash atheists. I think it's worth realizing that they're the same as us. They have a belief. They've taken a leap of faith into their way. There's no intellectual high ground here. You know what I mean?
Yeah. No, absolutely. And it kind of reminds me of a talk I was watching today between three atheist academics and a host. And they were talking about God. And firstly, to discuss God, basically, does God exist? Does it make sense? The host is asking three people who are already decided, like there's no God. But what's interesting is that they were really, you could tell by their body language, they're getting a kick out of it when they were talking about why there wasn't a God. So they were like, firstly, the way the host introduced it, and he himself is an atheist, is, well, we're going to talk about God, and once we move away from this trivial topic, we'll go to the other topics. And everyone's got this smile like, oh, yeah. Like they're making these remarks about God. And one of them says, well, God is not even a hypothesis, because to be a hypothesis, it's got to be at least something. And God is not even that. And then the audience started clapping. And I was thinking to myself, that's a very strange behavior for if you really truly believe there's no God. Like, I can clearly look at your psychology and just tell you guys that you're enjoying ridiculing God right now. And if you really truly believe God does not exist, why are you getting such a kick out of it? And why do you feel the constant need to just remind each other that there's no God? You should have dealt with it a few years ago and moved on. Why do you keep bringing it up to? And the audience was an atheist event, an atheist host, and three atheist academics, and they still felt the need to do that. So you're absolutely right. The psychology, I think, here is key.
I think that's a great point. And part of my motivation was, obviously being a Muslim, a lot of people, if I go to the park, for instance, a lot of people say to me, mate, why have you, what's happened in your life to take up this religion? So they're not giving me any credit for any intellectual decision. It's, something's happened to me. They're looking for something wrong. They're trying to poke a hole. One guy said, do you like horror films? And I was like, yeah. He goes, I found it. I found the reason why you converted to Islam. And people are trying to find a reason. I think because then they have to look at themselves. Because if somebody's accepting Islam without any of those reasons, then they're probably thinking, well, wow, that I thought, Muslims, I thought they were all sort of extreme, ginger-haired people. I didn't know normal people. But most reverts are postgraduate educated. They're just maybe not ones you see in the media. But I totally agree with you. I think for me, it's the animosity that, and I'm not talking about all atheists, but very, frequent online ones. There's like a resentment towards God. It's not like just an argument where they're just trying to prove something. There's a real, you'll hear comments like "Sky Daddy," "religious people are dumb," and these are the sort of comments you'll hear from that side. So they're kind of discrediting religious people. And like I said, if you look at a lot of the top philosophers who are atheists, a lot of them have had fathers pass away very young. I think a couple of them, their mums has run off with, an ex-priest, and there are all sorts of things in their lives that's you can see from a young age that they actually steered themselves anti-religion. I think it was actually Nietzsche that said that he had no reason for atheism. He thought it was something instinctive. So he's already admitted there that there's no intellectual thing. He instinctively felt atheism was true, and then went into his sort of journey of, critique of religion.
Yeah, and there's also like if you look at the new atheist movement and their speakers and their guides and the worldview that they're trying to project, there's this strange notion that we can't let other people believe, right? Like I was trying to make sense of this myself, that if I happen to be an atheist, I wouldn't spend my time arguing with Mormons and Jehovah's Witnesses. I mean, I would enjoy myself.
Yeah.
I mean, how many people have delusions all across the world, right? I mean, why would I spend my time reading books and writing books against religion? And it's a very strange thing to do. And the only way I could make sense of it is that you have the average atheist who's like, they're indifferent, right? If you push them, what are you? I'm an atheist. So they're like, I'm not speaking about them. They're just getting along with their lives. I'm talking about the ones who are vocal. I truly think they're looking for certainty. Yes. And they're not certain in their atheism, and that's why they're so vocal.
Yeah. And I think that the dead giveaway, Sabor, for me, is particularly, I noticed a lot of them are anti-Islam, is that they will fall on the side of the one against Islam every time. I think a rational person would probably go, well, that part of the Quran's, that's quite impressive, but that part I don't agree with. But no, you'll see them often jump on the back of every single anti-Islamic argument, and I find that fascinating.
Yeah, There's definitely a cycle. I mean, I would love for you to work on this, because I think with atheism, there's so much room for everybody to do like a specialist area. I am very interested in the psychology of atheism. I don't have time to do that. But if you could do that, that would be fantastic.
I've been obsessed with it the last couple of months. I've been looking into each one, whether it's Hitchens, Dawkins, Voltaire. I've been looking into their backgrounds and just finding, each person has something that's led them away. And my intention isn't to say that all atheists are people that have had bad upbringings. Of course, there are exceptions to any rule. But I think it's just holding the mirror up to that we're all in the same boat. We all may have things that have happened in our life, but we're all also capable of making intellectual decisions. It's not, atheists don't have entitlement over science and intellectualism.
Yep, and also something else that there's a consistent pattern that you see with militant atheists, which is wealth, right? So either they acquired wealth, or they have a love of wealth. They may not be wealthy themselves. The reason I'm saying this is because in the Quran, Allah points out the wealthy as being more prevalent in terms of disbelief. They're more likely to be disbelievers, people who are wealthy. Now, when you think about it, wealth should make you more grateful, that, you should have more reason to thank God. But wealth creates this sense of entitlement, this sense of self-sufficiency, the sense of looking down at people, and it generates essentially arrogance. And it's that arrogance which makes it very difficult for you to for you to accept the truth. So I'll just give you a small example of this.
No, you're right.
There's a posh guy, right, who we met in Oxford. Me and Hijab, we were there once, and we were talking to him. He was an atheist, and we were talking to him about some stuff. And he said, if I do turn to religion, I'll be a Christian. We were like, that doesn't make any sense. No. If you're an atheist, I mean, any atheist would say, okay, it's, at least the monotheism in Islam makes sense.
Yeah.
And he was like, well, my ancestors were Christian. And he had this thing about, my ancestors, and I'm studying here at Oxford, and he had this this posh sort of thing going on. And these things have a huge impact. If you have that lens, that it's sometimes very difficult for some people to consider that the person giving me the message is a lower status than me. And, we are this civilization, or we are these people. Yeah,
no, I completely agree. And I think, like I say, for me, a big part of my journey was that realization as well, that, because for me, if I'm looking into religion, if I believe in God, should I be a Christian? And I did have that in the back of my mind, but like I said, unfortunately for me personally, just the basics of Christianity it never just tallied up with me. So whereas Islam, from out the bat, it was a very clear, concise message. So I decided to look further and further in. Something I wanted to mention was is that every revert that I've spoken to, there is always, like I say, whilst it's always been an intellectual decision, there's always been a Muslim that has been kind of part of their journey. So someone that a good ambassador or good representation, perhaps they consider. Every single revert I've spoken to, that there's somebody that they've met or something and gone, wow, what's he on? He's really carrying himself well. So I guess the message behind that is our actions, how important our actions are in terms of calling people to Islam, because I honestly feel that, without, for instance, if I came, to be honest, I was fairly intellectually convinced, but if I came to Speaker's Corner and I met, the wrong Muslims, I may have gone, cool, what's going on? There's something not quite right. I happened to stumble across, some beautiful brothers at the park and kind of develop a relationship that way.
Yeah, definitely. And I want to go a few steps back to when you spoke about society and society's ills, and how Islam is a solution to that. So just before we start this conversation, because we have some atheists on the live stream, and every time there's a critique of some aspect of British life or the Western life, they make the straw man that, we're attacking the whole Western civilization. No, we're just talking about some particular things. And one of them is the way that women are treated, especially young girls. In society, I obviously get to meet some youth, and they speak about their problems. And one of the situations that we have now is that young girls, losing their virginity on camera, and somebody secretly filming them like they're like a boy at the age of 14. Then he puts it on Instagram, and there's all this disgusting stuff that's basically happening. And then you get like gangs. Like I obviously lived in a part of London where we had estates and we had these types of things, and you'll have like gangs of like 5 men, not men but young boys, right? And then one girl, and then she's just like hanging on, and then she's just being used, right? And I don't want to go into detail there, you can guess, right? Yeah. And Islam does actually give you a protection, although it looks like it's imposing something. It does actually give women that type of protection.
Yeah. Well, I remember saying to Hamza, I went to, I think it was Jummah with Hamza, and it was when he did his whole grooming gang video, and I remember we were just thinking, where has this come from? And obviously the news is putting things out, but I remember just thinking, from what I understand of Islam, I'm far less likely to be a groomer now than I ever was.
I remember you saying that.
I can't touch the hand. I can't use alcohol. So anything kind of grooming related is straight out the window. But I think some things, when you revert to Islam, some things shift straight away. And for me, probably because of the motivation of my niece, was how I viewed women all of a sudden. So I think I suddenly, and I think, to be honest, it made me reflect on myself as well. The reason why I feared for my niece in the West is because of possibly how I used to treat girls as well. And that's just what we're encouraged to do. So it's not only girls. I mean, boys, you're encouraged to, lose your virginity early. Your mates high five you if you get the nicest looking girl in a club. When you're 18, you go and get hammered for your birthday. And these are just things that you do, and it's ingrained within you. Everyone's trying to become that James Bond sort of character. I think that in terms of women, I think my value shift was suddenly looking at a woman as someone else's niece or daughter. And I remember thinking back to maybe some of my previous actions, thinking, "Cool, that was actually, that's someone's daughter, that's someone's niece." And for me, I believe that is the Islamic sort of that. When I first read the Quran, I actually thought it was biased to women. A lot of people say that Islam is. I actually feel that Islam is great for women. And look, 70% of reverts are female, and so But I think like you say, I think for me, I reflected on the society of how I grew up, what I was conditioned into, how other people are acting, where the country's going. Because I think even the atheists in the chat must be scared of where the country's leading in terms of what we're teaching our kids at schools. Yeah. The kind of liberal attitude around transgenderism, all kinds of things that I think just the normal person probably thinks, well, this is going a bit too far. And I think, at one point we're going to have to strip back to religious values.
Yeah. It kind of reminds me of when I was in school, this is the late 90s. I went to a Christian school, and it had Christian teachers who were properly Christian. They weren't like, nowadays, the sort of liberal Christians. Mm. And I remember, they, Church of England standard teachings and stuff, they were saying things like, abortion is murder. And, I remember when I shifted school from middle school to high school, it was the summertime, and it was quite hot. And some of the girls, they started wearing like, tops, which are, you could see their arms, you could see like quite tight, stuff like this. Mm. And this is year 9, like they're still kind of like how old? Not that old, right? 13, 14. 13, yeah. I remember our head teacher was so upset when he saw that these girls are dressed like this, that he actually gave a message to all the school teachers, and they told the students, because some of the girls, most of the girls were not like that, some of them were doing that, basically said, this is inappropriate for you to come, because we went to a casual school, you didn't really have uniform. So stuff like that, which is not that long ago, we're only talking about 20 years ago, right? Mm. But today, that head teacher, he would get slaughtered in the media. So those Christian values, which I believe in, when atheists say to me, look how great the West is, look what the West achieved, I just tell them that's Christianity. That's not atheism. Mm. Anything good in the West, and I've said this many times before, I said anything good in the West, and there is a lot of good, you can trace back to Christianity. Even Nietzsche, he said Christianity is a corpse science is a corpse that Christianity left behind, right? Because science is about, trying to get to truth essentially, right? And that Nietzsche said that's a Christian idea. Mm. So that's the thing, that there's many, many good values which we've lost. I mean, you're probably in your 30s, right? You're probably around like my age. Yeah. You know how better it was 20 years ago compared to today.
Yeah, 100%. It was definitely, I think, and this is always my confusion with, going to Speaker's Corner. And I'm not saying that's a reflection, but, the kind of Muslim Christian debates, completely, they look like enemies at the park, and the atheists kind of just walk around doing their thing. But to me, this country would be better off keeping its Christian values as much as possible. And I think as Muslims, it'd be easy for us as well if and Christianity's definitely sort of relinquished its hands on this country. I don't know whether it's been the fight against it or Christianity has kind of given in. But yeah, I agree with you. I think, Christianity is responsible for many, many good things that we're enjoying today. I agree with that.
And there's something that you pointed out before, which is about you don't want to be treating someone's daughter in a particular way, therefore you don't want that to happen to your daughter or your niece or whatever. And I was thinking about this concept because the Prophet, peace be upon him, when a young man came to him and said he wanted to have, extramarital, basically wanted to commit zina, right? And the Prophet said, would you like someone to do that to your daughter? Would you like someone to do that to your sister or your mother? Now, this reminded me of a hypocrisy which is existed in the post-Christian West, right? So since the time that firstly pornography before it even became mainstream, I remember watching a documentary where Christians, they were livid about it. The idea that, you could have this sort of thing. And this is, compared to what we have today, wasn't as bad. And the Christians were like, this is terrible and X, Y, Z, and then over time losing these values. And now we get to a point where things have come full circle. So there was a generation that wanted to follow its desires, womanize and sexualize and do all these things. Now the new generation, they've got a hypocrisy, and the hypocrisy is this. They lived a life of hedonism, of sexual desires and lusts and drinking and whining and clubbing, but they don't want their children to do that, and they're protective. So I'll give you an example.
That's right.
There's a rapper called T.I., right? And he recently got a lot of flack in the media because he said he doesn't want his daughter to have sex before marriage. So what he does is every year he takes her for a virginity test, right, to the doctors, and just to check she's still a virgin, right? Now my brain was like, well, what the heck? Like, who does this? Yeah. So I had no idea who this rapper T.I. was. I just heard he did this thing. So I Googled him and I found out, no, he did actually do this. Like, he's not letting his daughter.
It's interesting, isn't it?
Yeah. So then I thought, what type of rapper is he? I mean, I've never heard of this guy. So I went to YouTube and I clicked T.I. just to watch some of his videos. Literally, all I saw was him with naked women, right? And he's like, there's one video that I as Muslims, we're not supposed to watch this stuff, but I literally just wanted to, because I want to write about it. I want to make a video about this hypocrisy. And literally, the first scene is a woman who's in a bikini, and he's pointing and talking about her like an object and like rapping. And then I was thinking, how dare you do that to someone's daughter, and then your own daughter, you don't want that to happen? And I was thinking, this is the hypocrisy of the current system, that they don't want their children to do that, but they do that to other people.
Yeah, I agree with you. And, we have the sexual revolution of the 60s where, and a lot of these are kind of, for me, my parents' age. And you think that, I wasn't raised with those kind of morals. So you're right, there is a real, and I don't know where that comes from. I mean, do you think it's, we obviously got this idea, because something for me that attracted me to Islam was, it took us away from this, this sort of liberal notion that as long as I'm not hurting anyone, I can do what I want. I feel like that attitude disregards society. So to me, Islam not only cares about the individual, but a lot of the Sharia law is to make sure the society is cohesive and running well. Whereas, and that, I think that the fact that I don't think we have that in this country. A lot of it is, as long as I'm not hurting anyone, I can do what I want. I can walk down the road however I want, regardless of the fact that there are kids looking at you, that you are, you are indirectly affecting society around you. And I do feel like this is a real issue we have. And like I say, that's one of the things that attracts me to Islam. It kind of gets away from this notion of, I can do what I want to who I want, as long as it's not me, and probably arguably as long as it's not me and my family. As long as it's not to us, we're fine. But obviously that clearly doesn't work. And like you say, massive hypocrisy in it.
Yeah. And at the end of the day, if you look at some of the people who are the worst culprits possible, right? They actually have the most conservative values when it comes to their own lives. So a friend of mine, he's a revert to Islam, and before he was a revert, he was a proper lad, yeah? So he was into like pickup tactics and this and that, and Anyway, so he was telling me after he became Muslim, he was telling me that he was doing research into pickup artists, these people who literally probably in a year sleep with maybe 200-300 women a year. Like literally, they'll just have a one night, right? And they have tactics on, okay, so this woman, she's insecure, give her a compliment. Okay, this. And then he said to me, I've been following some of these celebrity pickup people who are on YouTube, and you can see their blogs. They have an entire science of how to pick up women and sleep with women and stuff. And he says, you know what's really strange is that when they finally want to settle down, they want somebody who's like completely non-flirtatious and like almost like a Muslim. That's what he said to me, and he researches this stuff. And that's the reality, because he knows that person's going to be a mother, right?
Right?
And he doesn't want the mother of his children to be the way that he's treated 1,000 women in his life.
It's interesting because we have a lot of role models. A lot of the role models to young girls are, you know, women that don't dress anything, that behave flirtatious and sleep around. And the men are looking up to James Bond sort of characters or rappers that have got loads of women. But deep down within us, I think we all respect that. You know, I think all men respect that family man that marries young, raises a family. Deep down, we all do respect that person. I think equally the other way. So yeah, I think that it's something that we're kind of raised with. When I look back to my behaviour as well, like you say, going back to pick up lines and stuff, you literally tell a girl any sort of lie. It doesn't matter, and it's just a game, and then they're all just a notch on your belt, and you wonder how do you go through that? You know, and like I say, reflecting that these girls, obviously a lot of them probably care for you, but to you it's just you're just going. And to be honest, we're conditioned into that. I don't believe, like for me, that was something necessarily in my nature. I remember being young, I remember being very young and holding a girl's hand and feeling romantic about it. But suddenly you're conditioned into kind of this guy that it's cool and doesn't have feelings towards women and can treat people badly, and you're kind of raised into this kind of society.
Yeah. And I wanted to start taking some questions because we've only got like about 12 minutes left.
Sure.
So this is a standard contention that you get when you talk about this topic, and I pre-framed it before, that when we start touching about some of the negative aspects of the Western lifestyle, you know, the automatic thing you get is something like this. We can talk about the issues in the West, but shouldn't we act? But we can't really act like that, like we have a moral superiority, especially if you look at what's happening in the Middle East. Now, I'm sure you know about Dubai, and you know about how women are there, and the lavish lifestyle, and the drugs, and the parties, and all this type of stuff. Yeah. As a standard contention, I mean, how would you deal with it? How would you deal with that?
In terms of like the Middle East and things like that?
No. Let me paraphrase it. So when we Muslims, we point out, you know, there's certain things within the Western world which you get from a theistic, whether it's Christian or Islamic values, which are good. And then automatically one of the replies you get is, well, that's rich coming from you guys who, you know, you're not exactly the moral standard bearers. I mean, look at what the Muslims are doing in the Middle East, or look at my local corner shop who sells me alcohol. His name is Ahmed.
Yeah, I agree.
So
I get this a lot. So as a Muslim, you know, if I debate or have a discussion with somebody, they'll immediately suddenly, for example, bring up Saudi Arabia and almost like I need to defend Saudi Arabia, like that is Islam. And I think, look, I can talk about good things of the West. I can talk about bad things of the West. I can talk about good things of the Middle East. I can talk about bad things in the Middle East. You know, the only thing I'm really concerned with is Islam. You know, I don't think you can just look at the Middle East and say that's Islam, because if you're doing that, then you need to follow the same standard. Maybe you look at America and say that's Christianity, or it seems to be only Islamic countries have that. Only Muslim Islamic countries. We have to answer for everything in those countries. So yeah, I kind of feel like it's I don't know if it's a straw man argument or it doesn't really hold weight. I have no reason to defend the Middle East if they are doing similar things to the West. If it's against Islam, it's against Islam.
Yeah, and a good way that I like Hamza does it is that you know, what is Islam and what is culture, what is a certain thing here, because you know, we have to understand the distinction between criticizing a certain social ill and criticizing generally British identity or the Western identity or the Western lifestyle. And constantly you find the EDL, you find all these types of people that when Muslims are speaking about a certain issue, they say, well, why don't you just go to Saudi Arabia? Why don't you just go to a Muslim country? Why are you attacking our way of life? When we're not, we're literally talking about like one aspect, right? I mean, if we were to look into, say, the British public, you will find out many people, they volunteer, many people they give charity. There's a lot of very, very good traits, yeah. And because it's much easier to attack a straw man, and the way the media's portrayed it is it's as if Muslims are saying everything about the West is evil, everything, which is why when I'm talking to non-Muslims, I try and emphasize, you know, that's not true at all. Muslims don't believe everything in the West is evil. When the Prophet, peace be upon him, came to Makkah, when he was in his first years calling people to Islam, he spoke about the negative aspects of the Meccan pagans, but he also highlighted their good things. And he said, I've come to basically, I'm paraphrasing him, but, you know, improve. I haven't come to like from scratch teach you right, about morals and these types of things. So that's important. And I think another thing that a lot of brothers don't make enough in the dawah is to speak about the fact that we have no problem with Christian values in the West. In fact, like you said, we would welcome a West that is way more Christianized. That would be a lot better for the Muslim community. I mean, that's the West that I grew up in, is a lot more Christian.
Yeah, I agree. And the stuff we've addressed, I feel that there could be any sort of traditional person could listen and agree with us. I don't, you know, we haven't been saying we need more mosques, we need more, we need to all wear thobes. We're not nothing, you know. And the reason why I'm discussing England and sort of where I see it slipping is because I care about the country. I was born here, and you know, there are some great things. I think I believe old England, you know, traditional values, manners, respect. I believe very almost Islamic. I think if you go back 100 years, even look at the modesty. Everyone's seen that video of sort of women covering up 150 years ago. But I believe, you know, the British values and Islam, our old British values, are very compatible. And for me, it's to seeing it all slipping. And I don't think you need to just be a Muslim to recognize that happening.
Absolutely, absolutely. And if you look back at, for example, some of the things which Christianity has done, right? I mean, they are negative things, of course. But we do have to recognize that Christians did fight for the abolishment of slavery, right? Of course, we can argue on the other end, there's some Christians who didn't or whatnot. But there is something very, very important about if we look at Victorian times and we look at the later part of the 19th century, there was a lot of poverty in Britain. There was a lot of inequality. And what you find is that even the novels at the time, like Oliver Twist, there was this whole idea of empathizing with the poor, right? Now, when Abdullah Quilliam and other British converts, the early converts, one of the first things that they did is they understood the British psyche. So rather than come along and say Allahu Akbar and we're going to challenge your worldview, they basically linked Islam to social work, which is exactly the sort of thing which was going to win over the Victorians and the Edwardians and the ones who came after them. And it had a phenomenal impact. Many, many people came to Islam through the works of Abdullah Quilliam and others. And I think we're missing that type of emotional intelligence in the British Dawah today. Yeah,
I agree. And I think I get people's point. You do often hear Muslims sometimes bashing the West. And I think, maybe it does need to be said that the West is, currently, I think, especially if you compare it to Europe, where you've got political parties looking at banning the burqa and reducing mosques, Britain, England allows us to practice. I can practice being a Muslim here without any issues. And so I think we are. I guess we are lucky for that as well, and should be thankful for that. But like I said, I think we've addressed a lot of good points that I think anyone can see that we're slipping, and I believe Islam would solve a lot of the problems of this country.
Excellent. So I have a question for you from Mukeet Khan. Jordan, has the mass infection with the Hollywood and YOLO virus amongst the Abrahamic faiths as a main reason why many young Muslims, Christians, and Jews leave conservative religion for atheism?
Yeah, so this kind of, you only live once and Hollywood lifestyle that people are attracted to, it certainly is attractive. And I think a lot of young Muslims that I've spoken to, they say to me, but Jordan, you had a good life. You can go out clubbing, you could do this, you could do that. And I think sometimes the grass is greener because I've obviously been there and I don't want any more of that. I think, has it affected young Muslims? I definitely feel that there is a pull, there is an attraction for a young Muslim who perhaps haven't got their foundations, particularly teenagers maybe. And unfortunately now a lot of young Muslims have idols that are either Hollywood musicians or unfortunately in that, I believe, all right, we should only have one idol, and that's our Prophet, peace be upon him. But with the sort of people, our young Muslims looking up to others, I think it's really important for the masjids, for Muslims together to ensure we keep Islam relevant and I wouldn't say cool because that's probably the wrong word, but I think even the stuff you're doing with the live streams, I think all these things add to it. But do I think that's responsible for Muslims leaving Islam? I would say probably a lot more than intellectual decisions. I think I've spoken to 2 ex-Muslims at the park, and both of them, by the end of it, they came up with all sorts of arguments. They said, yeah, but the inheritance in the Quran, the mathematical error. Then they say, yeah, but they talk about the Big Bang and things like that, and they're throwing a lot of these arguments out. But when you get down to it, you find out that really it was more to do with the fact that they didn't like the rules of Islam. They wanted more freedom. Yeah. And what I'd finish off with by saying is I feel freer now than I feel like I've escaped that and I'm freer now. So a lot of people will say the other way around, that I've suddenly left my freedom and now I'm living by rigid rules. But the reality is I was living by rules before. It's just that it wasn't from my creator. It was from the government. It was from society. It was from people around me. I've now freed myself from that. And I'm now, I believe I'm on the right path. So and that's how I try and explain it to younger Muslims is try and stay on the right path. Don't steer off in that direction, even if it looks attractive. And I kind of say I've been there, and it's not what you think it is.
Absolutely.
And I think you made a point earlier about, and the final point about, I don't want to keep on, but it's with sort of pornography, the way we treat women, these things can actually scar you into your later lives. I think there's plenty of evidence that this stuff affects people's relationships, affects the way people operate. So I think you have to be very careful, because I know some people that would just say, oh, I'll dabble in it for a couple of years and then I'll come back to the deen later. It doesn't work like that. It's not worth it.
And something else to keep in mind is there's research to show that if you have lots of relationships before your marriage, and if you have less relationships before your marriage, this is correlated with the likelihood of you having divorce.
Sure.
So people that have multiple partners before marriage, their marriage is much more likely to end in divorce. People who have way less partners, they have their marriage is more stable. Now, it didn't really include people who have like the Islamic paradigm. They have no partners except the one that they're married to, because this study was done in the Western world. So it's normal. It's normal that when you expose yourself to that much, openness, it's like someone who's gluttonous, someone who's used to eating takeaway every day and just continuously going out. Then one day, they're jobless and they just need to eat the basic food like egg and bread. They can be finding it very difficult. But you get a poor person from the Philippines and you give him egg and bread and he's so happy. He's like, oh my God, this is amazing. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's right. how much the threshold that you've sort of exposed yourself to.
Yeah.
So I want you to cover one more thing.
Yeah.
So when it comes down to your story, and accepting Islam, and now having the mission to go and convey Islam to other people, and share your experience, and really try and do the things that you're doing. One thing that I've consistently seen amongst reverts, and I might as well give you this warning bluntly, yeah, is that they're pushing a boulder up a mountain, and many times they slip and then they try again, or other times they just give up. And you find reverts who are like doing well, and then they just completely go back to their old lifestyle. Very few, especially in the first couple of years, they're just on it.
Yes.
So how would you advise? And there are reverts on the live stream, and they do comment and stuff. What advice would you give them to have that kind of steadfastness?
Yeah,
So
that's a great question. And I often feel like I'm trying, when I talk, like I'm some kind of pious, perfect person. I still have all the challenges that I had before. Obviously, my perspective's changed, but we all still, Shaitan still can hit all of us. And I think that the main thing that for me, especially in the early stages, everything was linked to my prayers. When my prayers slipped, I'd have more chance of going back. I almost call my prayers almost my Wi-Fi, my internet connection to Allah, because, and if you stop your prayers, you're much more likely. I think for me, I learned. I mean, to be honest, the EF Dawah guys did warn me as well. But I think the main thing is Tawheed, and sticking to the fundamentals and the fountain, and building your foundation. What I decided to do straight off the bat was turn up to Speaker's Corner. Start talking about misconceptions, start looking into, hadith that I'd never even heard of because someone had brought it up to me. And I think the best thing you can do is get your foundation solid. I wish I would have done the 99 names of Allah earlier. So these things I studied later on. I was very versed on, the beat your wife first and, and all these other things, more so than myself. And so I would say, yeah, keep the basics. I think straight after the Shahada, the prayer has to be established. Yeah. And then you trust in Allah, and don't ever think that you are going to suddenly become perfect. We had a sister that converted to Islam recently, and what she said blew my mind, because she said, I don't feel worthy of Islam. So she was delaying her Shahada because she didn't feel, I think it was almost a scared that once you've taken your Shahada, you have to be this perfect Muslim, otherwise you're letting everyone down. That's not really how it works for everybody. I think, once you take your Shahada, and then you build your foundations, and when you slip, you keep asking, trusting Allah, and you try and keep yourself on the, I'd say almost also surround yourself, if you can, with other Muslims that are on a similar journey as well. Is the other thing I would add to that.
Absolutely. It was, it's a very good way of summarizing it, that stick to the core, which is the spiritual element of Islam, because that will help you deal with everything. But if you get into things like, okay, let me answer this contention, or sectarianism, or just refutation and debates, it's all dry and mechanical. And you need that electricity inside you. You need that power. You need that energy. And that comes through a spiritual connection with Allah, because without that spiritual connection, you could fizzle out very, very easily. Yeah. And, may Allah give you istiqamat, may Allah give you steadfastness. I mean, the way I think about reverts to Islam is, it kind of reminds me of the early Sahaba who had to go against their society, because even though the Sahaba were persecuted, here you're not being persecuted, but you're leaving this society from a metaphysical point of view, but you still have all the pressures, you still have all the, the old friends, the old, contacts. And then on top of that, because I've dealt with a lot of reverts over the last 10 years, not only are you seen as a traitor by, the average person, even subconsciously, sometimes reverts face racism from I mean, I've got a friend who was literally like, you know, like he went to the mosque and he didn't really know what he was doing, so he actually went to go pray, and he turned up in his shorts, which, you know, for a Pakistani uncle is like blasphemy, but for a young British lad, it's just like, well, I became Muslim, it was a hot day, and you know, I just want to yeah, it's not it's not anything else. And so, you know, you guys have it really, really hard, and you know, may Allah give you patience. Okay, I just want one more commitment from you.
Sure.
Really interested in your stuff about psychology of atheism. When can you next come on? Maybe 2 weeks time or a week's time, where you could give us some of this, because I'm really interested in
it. I'll come on, and whenever you say, really. I'm very free at the moment, so yeah, you set a date, and yeah, we go on.
What I mean is, you need to compile your research, isn't it?
I will. I'll have research for each philosopher, and I'll summarize it, and yeah, we can even look at some theists, philosophers as well, and compare them.
Let's stick to next Thursday. It's Thursday today. We could do a week from now. You don't need, like, this conversation that we're having, the hour's gone past. We didn't even cover that much. So, you know, we could make it a bit of a regular thing, because I personally think a lot of people don't recognize atheists are not intellectual robots that you need to give an algorithm to and they'll have faith.
Yeah.
There's an entire background psychology, there's an entire background emotion behind it. And it would be great if you could cover some of the points, inshallah.
Yeah, no, definitely, inshallah. We'll do that. Thanks for having me on. Definitely.
And you can follow Jordan and Hamza and Abbas and all the rest of the EF Dawah guys. When's the next live stream you guys are doing?
So we're doing one tomorrow. It's me and Abbas on overzealousness. So yeah.
Nice.
Brother Abbas is a beautiful brother. I enjoy spending the live streams with him. He talks very well.
What time is that?
2 o'clock. So we're trying to do every other day at 2 o'clock at the moment.
Perfect. I'll be watching, inshallah. Jazakallah khair for your time, bro. Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum.